Alright folks, how you doing? Welcome back. So this was a very, very good scene in the movie Braveheart, but as always, the real life events were far more dramatic and a lot more interesting than what you actually saw in the film. And here is the passage from the book William Wallace, Robin Hood Revealed, page 45. The Englishmen had missed them, but they pursued quickly, using the sleuth hound. Wallace longed to reach some place of safety in the gaswood, but the hound followed their trail without respite until the enemy caught sight of them. The Scots were within 2 miles from the gaswood. They struggled up the steep slopes, with all their might, their hopes rising as night was beginning to fall. Fawdon claimed to be tiring, and insisted he could not go on. Wallace was unwilling to leave him behind. He urged Fawdon on, encouraging him to keep moving, as they would soon reach a place of safety, but he refused to go further. Wallace drew his sword and struck off Fawdon's head. The headless corpse tumbled to the ground. Wallace leapt on forward up the slope, leaving behind the dead Fawdon. Some judge Wallace was wrong, and others say that he did the right thing. I think it was better that he killed him, for 2 reasons. First, Fawdon was a fickle man, and held in great suspicion by the men, for he was powerful, strong, and yet he lagged behind the others. It also confused the sleuth hound when it reached the great puddle of Fawdon's blood. Wallace judged that if he had been left alone, and he was false, he would have gone over to the enemy, being the only way Fawdon could have saved his skin. If he remained loyal, only death awaited him at the hands of Englishmen. Wallace had no other recourse than to slay him. Decide for yourself on this matter. I only repeat the circumstances as my author, John Blair, has written it. By this time, the stars began to appear in the firmament. The English were drawing closer, 500 of them. Wallace hurried on to reach a more secure position. Unknown to him, Stephen and Carly had stayed behind. They hid in bushes on that hillside, which was to the east of Driplin. Fawdon's body lay in the open nearby. The English arrived and found him. They urged the hound on, but she had stopped beside the body, and would go no further from the time that she found the blood. Englishmen pondered on what had happened amongst Wallace and his men. They imagined, for they could do no more, that Wallace and his company had fought amongst themselves. Right annoyed they were that the hound had lost the scent. Wallace's two mingled in the midst of the English. They had removed those items of clothing that would have distinguished them as belonging to Wallace's band. Curly kept his eyes upon the bold heron as he looked down on Fawdon's corpse. With a subtle stroke, Curly's sword took Heron under the throat, gliding through the flesh of his neck and severing his neck bone. Heron collapsed to the ground, and many of them closed around their fallen leader. Treason, they cried. Curly fled out at one side. Stephen thought it was no time to wait around. Under cover of the uproar caused by Curly, and helped by the darkness, they escaped quickly from that place, running in the direction of Loch Earn. Butler, in grief, could not stem his tears. They judged it was the action of Wallace himself, or one of his men. They could not know for sure. Butler shouted, "He is very near, but we shall have him. The small wood will avail him little." So there you go. That's what actually happened in real life. This movie depiction. Even in the commentary, I seem to remember watching a DVD years ago that Mel Gibson said to establish Stephen of Ireland's character, they had a big battle scene in mind, but they just ran out of budget, or they ran out of time. So they were going to have this battle in the movie, as I've just read it out there from the book, but due to restrictions and constraints, they couldn't film the battle. I guess, they were running out of time and money. But, as always, the real life events were better than what you see in the film. And it's only one example. There are many others. So in reality, there was a man called Fawdon, and Wallace was a bit suspicious of him for obvious reasons, but he didn't need any help from Stephen of Ireland to kill him. He killed him himself. Took his head off because he thought, "You're acting right suspicious here, pal, and now's not the time." So anyway, hope you enjoyed that little passage. It's been a while since I covered this book, and I'm going to recover it again on Tribe of Judah. Anyway, thanks for listening.